Hello Vlogalogue, how's it going? I'm a little bit late and a little bit sick, and I am sorry and accept your sympathies, respectively. Really enjoying this week's discussion, in particular the dichotomy of demons and daemons. I will use both pronunciations depending on what I am talking about, but I find it's actually very fascinating because daemon is not really an archaic thing, because it's had a resurgence in a particular aspect, which I'll come on to. But I think it is interesting to think about kind of the way that we used to imagine things that we wrestle with, humans are naturally wired to see the world as a network of agents that have motives. It's very easy for us to see motives where none may exist. That's why we don't bat an eye if someone says, my phone's being a jerk. Though if you think about that, that'd be kind of like saying, this mousetrap is being mean. It's not animate. It doesn't have agency. It does exactly what it does. And sometimes it does, it does things that we don't expect, or there may be bits that are in the wrong place or whatever, and so it behaves in a way that we may not like. But we nonetheless feel very comfortable saying that this pen is being frustrating. That it's very easy for us to kind of look at things that way. And I find it interesting to look back and think about when the term daemon was in kind of popular use. People thought about having muses. Now, if we use the term muse, which we don't really use it much anymore, but we talk about it as you say, so-and-so, it's my muse. It's more of, we don't necessarily think that they're necessarily actively helping with the creative process, but they're someone who inspires or motivates you to be creative. The thought of them inspires you to be creative. Whereas previously the idea of a muse was really that it was this sort of thing that actually participated and gave you the inspiration and gave you these cool ideas, and it was your job to be the workhorse that jotted the ideas down or expressed them in whatever medium would be appropriate. And I wonder to what extent, when we look back historically at daemons and muses, it is that at the time people did really think of. I mean, obviously, you look back at the multitude of gods and stuff with all their distinct personalities and foibles and whatnot, and you wonder to what extent the population had a greater appreciation for kind of these rich narratives as a way of understanding the world, or whether they actually believed more in the agency of things which are manifestly not so. I know, it's an interesting question to me. Like, would it have been reasonable, if you were in ancient Rome and someone said, the table is being obstinate, would you think that, wow, they are a very poetic person? Or would you think that, wow, they have a very poor understanding of physics? So I find that fascinating, and I find it particularly fascinating. So now onto the actual daemon thing. Daemon is actually has had a contemporary resurgence because it is used in software very, very frequently. And so I tend to use the word daemon when I'm referring to software, and demon when I'm not, just to try and make that distinction. But the idea of a daemon is that it is software that runs in the background independent of direct user control. There's a well-known computer daemon called Monet, which is a piece of software that you'll put on a server. And what Monet does is it monitors the stuff that's going on in your server. You can tell it, pay attention to my web application, and if it dies, start it up again. Or if all of a sudden, the system runs out of memory, send me an email, or that sort of thing. And what we are doing is we both call them daemons, and we sometimes call them agents, which I think is it's a telling way to phrase it, that we perceive these. If you run a particular program, if you launch Facebook, you click the notification button and the notification window comes down. There's no perceived agency there. It is a direct response to your interaction with it. A daemon does not respond to direct stimuli. It responds, it effectively does. Everything in a computer is deterministic, but the appearance is not, oh, I went and I clicked a button and it did something. That instead it takes actions that are perceived to be somewhat spontaneous. You can call these agents or daemons or whatever, and I find that really interesting. I think even on your own computer, if you go into a coffee shop or whatever, and you open up your laptop, and it'll go ahead and say, "Hey, there's Wi-Fi available." Well, that's weird because you didn't ask it if there was Wi-Fi available. Well, that's a daemon. It's an agent. It's a thing that constantly just sits there and looks around and notices Wi-Fi and then tells you about it and asks you if you'd like to connect. I find this particularly fascinating because it's something that I've been thinking a lot about with regard to social media and digital identity, because certain tools allow us to delay tweets to go out at a reasonable time. Certain things like, and even then, there are things like on Twitter, if you get retweeted, all of a sudden the thing that you wanted to say is now presented in a different context to a different audience. And there are services like If This Then That, where you can say, if I turn on the light switch, then share a photo to Instagram, or whatever you may want to do. And what I've started to feel is that the combination of all of these algorithms has actually made sort of a spontaneous daemon that no one kind of designed top down, but an emergent daemon for all of us. That there is a Kevin Damon, not Matt Damon, but a Kevin Damon that is somewhat like me, but also responds differently and responds somewhat spontaneously to certain things that happen on the internet. And I find that fascinating, and I think that this is one of the first cases where these daemons have kind of emerged and can interact with the world. If you imagine, if I say something as a joke and it's somewhat mean, and someone happens to retweet it at the wrong time, and then it ends up getting posted to Facebook because someone's got a curated feed thing that throws it over there, and then someone else happens to like it on Facebook, and therefore it gets shunted into someone else's feed, and they're having a bad day, then the thing that I've said could make them miserable weeks later without me having taken any interaction at all. That now we've created these daemons that have the ability to act somewhat spontaneously. And while we know that they are not sentient, they act and are increasing to act more like agents that have their own agendas that spread in certain ways. And I find that really fascinating. So the topic for this week, now that I've rambled on a lot, because I find this really, really fascinating. This is just a fascination of mine. But the topic this week, because I want to hear, I like this conversation, I want more of these types of conversations. I want to invite everybody to think about something that you like, that most people either don't know about or aren't particularly fond of, or whatever it may be. In this case, I'm talking about random computery stuff, which is not relevant to the majority of the population, but I find it interesting nonetheless. And I'd like to invite you all to look at, to talk about what it is that you like about it, and what are some of the things that you find interesting, and try to explain what's going on in that thing for which you have an interest, to those of us who may be completely oblivious to the fact that it exists. So yes, that is the topic this week. I'm looking forward to seeing what other people have to say, and I hope you are all well. I'll talk to you soon, Vlogalogue.